welcome to Real Watchers Movie Club. My name is Garrett.
And I'm Kevin.
And we are your hosts. Movie Club is a show where we pick a movie each week and discuss it just like a book club. On today's show, we are covering the crime thriller Heat. Our thoughts and more coming up on Movie Club. Released in 1995, Heat was directed by Michael Mann and stars Robert DeNiro, Al Pacino, and Val Kilmer. A group of high-end professional thieves start to feel the heat from the LAPD when they unknowingly leave a verbal clue at their latest heist. It's ranked 105 on IMDb's Top 250 and has a 4.3 out of 5 on Letterboxd and is ranked 169 on its Top 250. Before we dive into our thoughts, though, we do want to issue a spoiler warning for the film. We're going to talk about everything that happens over the course of this movie, so we do not want to spoil it for you if you've never seen it. So go and watch it. If it at all interests you, then come back here and hear what we have to say. But stay tuned to the end of the show to find out what movie we're covering next week, because it is one I can guarantee, unless you're a cinephile, you've probably never seen it before. Alrighty, Kevin, so Heat is the movie this week, and this is your pick. What made you pick Heat?
I heard it's a good action heist movie and has all the big names in it, DeNiro, and all the ones that you expect to be in a action heist gangsterish movie. So I wanted to check it out, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah, I'm certainly glad that I checked it out for the first time as well. So this is my first time watching this movie. I had actually never seen it, but I've seen it referenced in so many other different films and TV shows.
Yeah.
And I have always been a fan of the shootout sequence that happens after the bank heist in this movie, because it is, as far as I can tell, one of the best shootouts ever put on a film.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
We'll get to that a little bit more a little later. But I had never seen the movie, even though I own it, because I was like, it was on sale, and I was like, this is one of those classic movies. Yeah, I'm certainly glad that I saw it. I think you're gonna be on the same page as me here.
I think we're in the same boat.
Don't get the hype.
Yeah, I can see it's really fantastically made. The shots are amazing. The actors are amazing. Everything like that. The scenario is really cool. But I don't know. I'd rather watch John Wick 2, like, more than this, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I feel like I'll just go ahead. I'll dive into what my biggest problem with this movie is. And I think it's the pacing.
It goes up and down. It's roller coaster.
It is. There are points of this movie where I was bored to tears. But then it shoots back in the complete opposite direction, and it gets to be some of the best action crime content of the 90s, as far as I can tell. But it's so swing of the pendulum. This movie is almost 3 hours long.
Yeah, and sometimes you can feel it.
And that's when you have bad pacing. I'm going to continue to use this as an example, but The Brutalist is longer than this movie. 3 hours and 15 minutes, right? And that movie is about an architect, and it's better paced than this movie, which is a heist crime thriller.
Which should be paced throughout the entire movie, period. Exactly.
It should have been an hour shorter. I'm just going to go say it.
I don't know, an hour, like 30 minutes shorter, like a 2-hour movie about this, I think would be perfectly fine.
It feels like it's trying to go for something like...
It's trying to be bigger than it actually is.
Yes, it's trying to be like a Godfather. This large, sprawling crime epic, and it's really not that epic.
It has epic moments, but if it's not in that epic moment, like the stuff with the family, I feel like that is like one of the the going down the roller coaster is okay. I'm so sorry, I didn't give a crap about their wives and stuff like that, and it just going, well, I'm gonna leave the kids if you don't come back. It's like, okay, but he's doing his job. Like, what do you want him to do? like stuff like that really didn't take me out of the movie. It was just like, oh, we're in a pause before we get to more action. And you can
Sure.
once you start seeing that repetition, you're like, okay, this is, I can go get a drink real quick while they're talking.
Yeah, and you do have to. I do understand what Michael Mann is going for here, right? Like you do have to try and humanize characters that are breaking the law and are doing illegal
Yeah.
things. You know, because that automatically makes them a bad guy in a lot of people's eyes, and so you do need something to bring them down to a human level.
Hmm.
Which I understand, but it's just like like you're saying, I could not give two shits about Val Kilmer's family situation. Like I just
Hmm.
like sure the performances are fine, but
Hmm.
like the material they're given just isn't that interesting.
No,
Um,
it's not.
which is really a kind of a letdown here. Um, but I also think that this movie, I don't know if this was the first movie that DeNiro and Pacino were in together talking to each other, but always remember it being billed as one of the big ones that
Hmm.
they're together and they're hunting each other or whatever. And it's like, I get it. Like, it feels like it's thriving on that premise a little too much.
Too much. Yeah.
But, like, still, the stuff with them, like when they're in the diner eating together, is
Oh,
fantastic.
it's fantastic. The end of the movie,
And
fantastic
the
as
movie is
well.
fantastic as well.
Hmm.
And so I think like if this movie had been slimmed down to just the cat and mouse chase between them, not stuff about their families,
Hmm.
and gone more in the direction of the heists and like they do a heist and then Pacino happens to find De Niro at a restaurant and he's talking to him and he's like, I suspect that you're doing it, but I don't have proof. And
Hmm.
they have all these things and they show all these crimes that they do, and then that's when they hear the verbal clue that leads Pacino to start hunting De Niro. Like that would be a far more consistently interesting movie
Hmm.
as opposed to this, which is trying to. I don't want to say it's trying to pad its runtime
Hmm.
because it's not. Everything does feel somewhat, you know, uh,
Necessary.
necessary and like important-ish.
Hmm.
Even though you can live without it, it feels
Yeah.
like it was important to obviously Michael Mann, who wrote it, to put enough in the movie. I just don't necessarily agree with that choice, and I think that it's a little boring for 20-30% of its runtime.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I'd rather have more of the heist aspect of it than the family aspect of it. I mean,
Yeah,
and I know some of it, again, like you said, some of it is necessary, but a lot of it is just, oh, I know what they're gonna say here because he hasn't been home in 3 weeks or something like that, and the wife is getting fed up with him, and oh, this is what you do for a job. It's like, yeah, no crap, like you couldn't have figured that out like at the beginning of the movie. But yeah, other than that, this movie's great.
yeah, and I think a lot of people remember this movie, and I think a lot of people like you and me who have played a lot of specifically Grand Theft Auto 5 are going to get a lot out of this movie because a lot of the inspiration for Grand Theft Auto 5's heists came from movies like this.
Hmm. Hmm.
And this movie has inspired so many after it. And you can see why. The movie is legitimately engaging for
Yeah.
its entire runtime.
Hmm.
Like, I'm, I can be complaining and like, you know, like sitting here sounding like the movie is boring. Even its most boring elements are not completely boring. It's not like you're losing focus or like it's enough to pull you out of the movie for that little bit of time and make you feel its runtime, but it's still important to the story. So it is engaging. It's just
Yeah.
boring. It's boring.
It's just,
It's like a boring lecture on your favorite thing. Is
yeah.
probably the
Hmm.
best way I
You,
can
you,
describe it.
you get to the part where you're like, oh my gosh, I know what is written here. And that, but I still have to sit through it through the entire thing until I can get to the best part of the lecture or the movie.
Yeah,
But
yeah, and it may
yeah.
be something that like on another rewatch, because I will rewatch this movie at some point.
Hmm.
Well, I own it, so I hope I will watch it at some point. Um, but like maybe I'll enjoy it more then.
Yeah, and another one is, I don't know if I'll be rewatching this anytime soon. That's the thing
I
with
get
this
that.
one, because it's like Okay, the runtime, don't care about the runtime, but it's like I just watched it now and I'm like I'm tired of watching the
Mhm.
movie because of what happens, and kind of have to stay focused a little bit, especially at the beginning, to understand who kind of is the snitch in this. And it's just after that I felt a little drained because I was sitting there for again almost 3 hours,
Mhm.
and you're like, okay, it was a good movie, but when I'm not gonna turn around and rewatch it right then and there. It might take a
Yeah.
little bit for me to, hey, you know what? Heat's on. Like, this would be a great TV movie.
Mhm.
Like, Heat's on TV. I'll I'll flip through the channels and watch a little bit of it. Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of like that.
And you can, you can watch something else during the things you don't want to watch or whatever, and then you can get
Mm-hmm.
back to it and watch the things that you do enjoy. Like I like you're talking about how you don't really want to rewatch this movie immediately. I do want to rewatch specifically the heist scenes.
Yeah.
They're great.
Mm-hmm.
Legit, and the ending is also very good too.
Yes.
So like those are the kind of things that I'm like more eager to rewatch. It's less affected the entire movie.
Exactly. You want to see
Yes.
clips of the movie and not its entirety, unfortunately.
Which kind of leans back into what I was saying.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like like it's engaging the whole time, but it's just not enough to warrant your full attention
Yeah.
the
Exactly.
whole time.
But
And maybe I've
um,
contradicted myself a couple times in what I've been saying,
yeah.
but yeah,
But
and then like, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say we can talk about the heist though. The action in this movie is absolutely fantastic. Like, give me more.
And like the behind the scenes for how they did that major heist
Street
sequence is fantastic. I would highly recommend you check it out, specifically Kevin and anyone watching too. But they, all the people who played cops went and trained with cops for like a month or a week or whatever it
Mm.
was. All of the people who were in the heist, so DeNiro and all them, trained with former criminals,
Ooh.
and they actually all studied different tactics on how they were going to engage in that battle. And that whole battle feels the most realistic of any shootout sequence of its time for sure. And even
Mhm.
now, it still feels very realistic. But I
Yeah.
also really appreciate that scene specifically because what's really awesome about this is that all the gunfire you're hearing was the gunfire recorded on the day of shooting. So they were using
Oh.
blanks and all that when they
Yeah.
were firing, but when they were doing the sound design later, they could just not get gunshots that sounded as good as they wanted it to.
Mm-hmm.
So they just left in the original gunfire audio, and it makes it
Wait,
so much more realistic.
It makes it perfect actually, because I didn't even know that. I thought it was like maybe gunfire put into the movie, but if it seems so genuine now with
Yeah.
with you telling me that.
Yeah, a shootout like this is going to be loud, and it
Mhm.
is going to be not pleasant sounding like some other gunfight scenes can be. Like
Mhm.
it's going to be chaotic. It is going to be a war zone, and
Yeah.
that is what they nail about the shootout sequence, and it is so good.
And you can tell that it's loud there too, because De Niro and the people doing the heist are yelling half the time at each other, and that's what it's supposed to feel like. It's supposed to feel real in that aspect of it. And if they would have just done, did they just put in gun sound noises? I don't think you get the yelling. I think you get maybe a soft yell, but you can hear them really well.
Yeah,
after
they're
the
screaming
gunfight.
in this one. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's and it makes the difference. It just makes it so much more real and down to earth and
Mhm.
gritty. And that's what I think really a lot of people remember most about this movie.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, but in that, I mean, the sound design is very well done for this movie. Granted, it's mostly recorded from the actual day of, but like it's very well done. The music, nothing like super extraordinary, but it fits the movie well enough. And I
Mhm.
think that it is directed well. Michael Mann is a good director,
Yeah.
but again, like I think there is just a little bit too much of that, like I'm making my epic and I don't want to cut anything kind of a feel to it.
It feels like
So
a Snyder movie in
a
aspect.
little bit, but way more competently directed than the Snyder.
Yeah, yeah, but it's like Snyder's like, I want this. No one touch anything, kind of
Sure,
thing. Hmm.
sure. And with that, I mean, honestly, I don't have a whole lot else to talk about this movie. I think it's a good movie. I would even call it a potentially great movie,
Hmm.
but it's just not a movie that I loved like I thought I was going to. And maybe
Hmm.
on this first viewing, I just had my hopes way too high.
Yeah, I mean,
And
we got our high hopes too because of the gunfire, the action, and everything like that. But I think we were just very disappointed with the pacing of this movie.
yeah, 100%. And I think it's interesting because there's a lot of people on Letterboxd and film media, both, more casual moviegoers and
Hmm.
more hardcore cinephile snubs. And everyone seems to agree that this movie is fantastic. And so that does get your hopes up. And I think that when you kind of come in with those high hopes mistakenly, like I did, then you're a little disappointed when you walk out. I do want to rewatch this again, though, to see if, with those expectations tempered, if I like
Hmm.
it better on the second viewing.
Okay.
But let's go ahead and get to our final thoughts and scores here, Kevin. This was your pick this week. So, what was your final thoughts and your score?
My final thoughts of this movie was it's a great movie. It does have some ups and downs with its pacing, but at the end of the day, it's a heist movie with a lot of great action and action shots as well for me. The cast, the actors and actresses can't go wrong with any of them. They're all fantastic for us. But again, those ups and downs and the pacing really just didn't stick it for me. So I gave it a 90 out of 100, which comes out to 4.5 stars out of 5.
All right. So for me, I said that I feel like every aspect about this movie pretty much works except its pacing is the biggest thing. And I think it's also just missing something of an X factor for me. I didn't love it on first viewing. Like it's missing that thing to make me adore it. I don't know what
Hmm.
it could be. Maybe it's the pacing, maybe it's the length, maybe it's some unfocused, maybe too much of it is unfocused, but I do think this could be something that could have been like truly legendary to me if it had just been a little bit, but also it could be a personal thing. I think my expectations were way too high. So
Hmm.
for me, I gave the film an 81 out of 100. So I gave it a 4 stars out of 5. But that is going to bring us to the end of this episode. A little bit of a shorter one, especially after last week. But I feel like there's a lot more to discuss last week than there is
Last week.
here.
Yeah.
But the question now falls to you. What do you think of Heat? We'd love to hear down in the comment section down below. But remember to be respectful of one another because you don't know who's a cop and who is a criminal. But next week, super excited, we're going to be covering a Chinese romantic drama by Wong Kar-wai called Chungking Express. Very excited about this movie, so make sure to watch it before next week if you're interested so we do not spoil it for you. And that'll be it. So thank you so much for watching. Of course, we have our live stream that goes live every single Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where we talk about movie news, reviews, and so much more. And then, of course, this show, Movie Club, goes live every Friday at 4 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out when those go live. But that is it again. Thank you so much. And until next time, make sure you keep those eyes on the screen.